The sun was just beginning to dip behind the rows of identical beige townhouses in the Willow Creek HOA neighborhood. The streets, lined with freshly trimmed hedges and immaculate sidewalks, hummed with the last bursts of suburban life. Children riding bikes, neighbors chatting over fences, and sprinklers hissing quietly onto lush lawns. To an outsider, it looked like the picture-perfect community. But inside those neat houses, hidden behind white picket fences, simmered the kind of tension that no amount of lawn care could mask. Karen Mitchell stood on her front porch, arms crossed, tightly, her sharp eyes fixed on the new family moving into the house across the street. The drill sergeant, Jackson, was unloading the last of the moving boxes. His sturdy frame and military posture, impossible to miss. Following closely was his teenage daughter, Emily, her wheelchair, wheeling smoothly over the cracked sidewalk. Karen didn't like new neighbors, especially not ones who disrupted the delicate balance of the HOA's social order. She had earned her reputation as the neighborhood's self-appointed guardian, quick to call out the smallest infraction. But Jackson's family, something about them rubbed her the wrong way. Maybe it was the way Jackson's intense gaze swept the street, or the soft way Emily smiled. Despite her obvious disability, whatever it was, Karen felt an uneasy knot twist inside her. Across the street, Emily stopped to catch her breath. Her eyes scanned the yard, cluttered with moving boxes. She paused by a small patch of dirt where wildflowers had started to sprout. It was a sharp contrast to Karen's immaculately kept garden next door, where every petal and leaf was ordered into perfection. Emily smiled faintly, her fingers brushing over a delicate purple bloom. From the porch, Karen's lips curled into a tight line. She didn't just dislike change, she hated imperfection. That little patch of wildflowers was an affront to her carefully curated world. Her gaze sharpened. As if sensing the tension, Emily wheeled herself down the street towards the community pool, a small spot where neighborhood kids often gathered. The pool was already buzzing with summer energy, children shrieking with delight, parents lounging with iced drinks, and the lifeguard whistling to keep order. Karen followed, her heels clicking on the pavement like a warning. She kept her distance, but her eyes never left Emily. The other neighbors noticed, but stayed silent, familiar with Karen's reputation for stirring trouble. Emily dipped her hand in the cool water, letting droplets splash playfully. For a moment, the world softened, the carefree laughter, the shimmer of the pool, the warm breeze carrying the scent of freshly mown grass. But Karen's dark eyes cut through it all like a knife. Suddenly, a soccer ball rolled into the pool area, bouncing to a stop right by Emily's chair. She glanced up as a group of kids called for her to join the game. Tentatively, Emily nodded. She tried to maneuver her chair onto the grassy patch near the pool's edge. The chair's wheels pressed softly into the grass. Then, unexpectedly, the front wheel dipped into a muddy patch near the edge of Karen's yard. Karen gasped. Her perfect garden was about to be soiled. Without thinking, she stormed over. "Hey, what do you think you're doing in my yard?" she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut through the summer air. Emily looked up, startled. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." Karen cut her off. "You don't belong here. You and your mess." Nearby, neighbors turned their heads, sensing an argument. The drill sergeant, who had been watching from his porch, started walking over, his face hardening. As the sun dipped lower, shadows lengthened across the street, mirroring the dark cloud forming over Willow Creek. What had begun as a quiet summer evening was about to become the breaking point for Karen and the Jackson family. Karen's sharp words hung in the humid air, like a storm cloud ready to burst. Emily's fingers tightened instinctively on the wheelchair's armrest. her eyes flickering with hurt, but refusing to back down. The summer pool party had suddenly gone quiet. All eyes drawn to the unfolding confrontation. "I didn't mean to hurt your garden," Emily said softly, her voice steady despite the tension. "I was just trying to play." Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. "Well, maybe you should learn to stay where you belong," she snapped. Her tone was laced with something colder than irritation, something deep and personal, like a vendetta simmering just beneath the surface. The drill sergeant, Jackson, had reached the edge of the lawn. His military bearing was impossible to ignore, his eyes sharp and commanding. He didn't say anything at first, simply standing tall, beside Emily, a silent shield. Karen's gaze flicked to him, her anger flickering with a mix of defiance and disdain. "And who are you to tell me how to run my yard?" Jackson's voice was calm, but firm, like the steady beat of a drum in the chaos. "We're your neighbors, and this is a community. We respect each other here." "Respect?" Karen laughed, bitterly. "You're the one who brought her here, expecting everyone to tiptoe around a handicapped kid." Emily's eyes flashed with a quiet strength that surprised even Karen. "I'm not a handicapped kid," she said firmly. "I'm just like you, maybe a little slower, but that doesn't mean I'm not part of this neighborhood." Karen's face twisted with something ugly. "You're an eyesore. That's what you are. And if you can't stay out of my way, maybe you shouldn't be here." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some neighbors shifted uncomfortably, while others exchanged worried glances. Karen was known for her outbursts, but this felt different, more dangerous. Jackson took a step forward. "You need to watch your tone, Karen. We all have a right to live here peacefully." "Or what?" Karen spat back, stepping closer to Emily, her eyes locked on the girl's wheelchair, as if daring her to move. Emily remained still, but her heart pounded. Years of therapy and training had prepared her for bullying and cruelty. But this raw hatred was new. She swallowed hard, refusing to give Karen the satisfaction of seeing her fear. Before anyone could react, Karen's phone buzzed. She glanced down, the fury in her eyes dimming for a moment as she read the message. Her jaw clenched tightly. Without a word, she turned on her heel and stalked back to her porch, leaving a trail of shocked silence behind. Jackson exhaled slowly, glancing at Emily. "Are you okay?" Emily nodded, but her hands trembled slightly. "I'm fine. Just tired of being treated like I don't belong. Not here," Jackson promised. "Not while I'm around." As Karen slammed her door shut, whispers spread like wildfire. Had Karen crossed a line? Would the HOA step in? And most importantly, was this the spark that would ignite a larger fire in the peaceful neighborhood? But Karen's fury was far from spent. That night, alone in her perfectly tidy home, she sat staring at the window overlooking the Jacksons' house. Her mind raced with thoughts darker than the night outside. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The next morning, the HOA's community board received a flurry of messages, some calling for peace, others accusing Karen of harassment. The board members exchanged concerned looks. The delicate balance of Willow Creek had just been shattered. Meanwhile, Emily and her father prepared for another day, unaware that Karen's obsession was growing deeper, and that the quiet streets of Willow Creek were about to become the stage for a battle no one could have predicted. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of Karen's pristine living room, casting sharp shadows on the spotless floors. Yet inside, chaos raged. Karen sat stiffly at her kitchen table, clutching a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. Her fingers drummed anxiously against the ceramic, and her mind replayed the confrontation from the day before. That girl, Emily, had pushed every button Karen thought she'd kept safely locked away. The wheelchair, the quiet defiance, the pitying glances from neighbors, all ignited something deeper than mere irritation. Karen's husband, Mark, noticed the tension as he passed by. "You okay?" he asked cautiously. Karen didn't meet his eyes. "No, they're all taking her side. Even the HOA board is worried about me. This Jackson family. They think they can just move in here and change everything." Mark sighed. "Maybe you should try to back off, Karen. It's just a kid." Karen shook her head sharply. "It's not just the kid. It's the whole attitude. I've kept this neighborhood perfect for years. Rules mean something here, and they're breaking them, quietly, under our noses." Her voice lowered. "I'm going to find a way to make them understand they don't belong." Meanwhile, across the street, Jackson and Emily prepared for the day. The military discipline that defined Jackson's every move was apparent even in these quiet moments. He checked Emily's wheelchair, adjusted her straps, and reviewed the day's plan. Emily caught his eye and smiled faintly. "Do you think things will get better?" Jackson's expression softened. "They have to. But people like Karen, they don't change overnight." Emily's gaze dropped to her hands. "I just want to be normal, to be accepted." Jackson placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "You're more than accepted here. You're respected, and I won't let anyone take that away." But beneath his calm exterior, Jackson felt a familiar tension. His military career had prepared him for conflict, but not this kind. Personal, drawn out, and fueled by old grudges. That afternoon, Karen slipped out of her house with a clipboard, determined to document every violation by the Jackson family. She watched from behind her curtains as Emily wheeled herself to the mailbox, the sunlight glinting off the rims of her chair. A cold fury settled over Karen. This was her territory, and she wouldn't let anyone claim it without a fight. Her first move was a letter to the HOA board, full of complaints about noise, parking, and what she called disruptive behavior. She made sure to emphasize Emily's presence, painting the girl as a nuisance rather than a neighbor. The HOA secretary, Lisa, read the letter and sighed. She had dealt with Karen's demands before, too many times to count, but this felt different. Karen's anger was sharper, more focused. Something was driving her beyond the usual petty disputes. Lisa forwarded the letter to the board with a note. "This needs urgent attention. The neighborhood is already tense." That evening, the HOA board convened an emergency meeting in the community center. Tensions were high. Some members sympathized with Karen's insistence on rules. Others worried about the implications of her targeting a disabled child. Jackson attended with Emily, hoping to speak directly to the board. He stood tall, his voice steady, but filled with conviction. "We're not asking for special treatment," he said. "Just respect. We want to be part of this community, not the source of conflict." Karen sat on the opposite side of the room, her jaw clenched, eyes cold as she watched. When the meeting ended without a clear resolution, the room buzzed with uneasy whispers. It was clear the conflict wasn't going away. It was only getting worse. Later that night, Karen sat alone again, staring out at the darkened street. Her mind churned with plans, each more desperate than the last. She was convinced the Jackson family was a threat to everything she held dear. But what Karen didn't realize was that this simmering conflict would soon boil over and change the neighborhood forever. The sun was sinking low as the neighborhood gathered once again at the community park, where the HOA had organized a casual summer meet and greet to ease tensions. It was supposed to be a night for neighbors to connect, to laugh, and to forget the recent storms, but the air buzzed with undercurrents of unease. Karen arrived early, clutching a small notebook filled with complaints and observations she had painstakingly recorded over the past week. She scanned the crowd with a practiced eye, finally settling on Emily, who was sitting quietly at the edge of the playground, her wheelchair parked neatly beside her. Karen's pulse quickened. The sight of Emily smiling at a group of kids playing tag felt like a provocation. That smile, so calm and self-assured, was a challenge Karen refused to ignore. When the HOA president called the meeting to order, Karen raised her hand with a force that drew all eyes. "I have something to say," she declared, her voice sharp and unwavering. All chatter ceased. Neighbors turned, some with curiosity, others with apprehension. Karen's gaze locked onto Emily as she began. "This community prides itself on order and respect for the rules. But lately, we've seen behavior that threatens that balance. Noise after hours, parking violations, and most concerning, disruptions caused by the Jackson family." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few people nodded, but many exchanged uneasy glances. Jackson stood, his military posture commanding attention. "Karen," he said evenly, "Emily has never caused a disruption. She's a young girl trying to be part of this community. We all want peace here." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Peace? This isn't peace. It's chaos masked by smiles and excuses. If we don't enforce the rules, this neighborhood will fall apart." Emily's eyes met Karen's, steady and unwavering. "I'm not causing chaos. I just want to be treated like everyone else." Karen's lips curled into a sneer. "Like everyone else? You're different, Emily, and different isn't welcome." A sharp gasp came from the crowd. The air turned electric. Before anyone could respond, Karen's voice rose, fueled by a fire that had been burning too long. "If you won't respect the rules, then maybe you don't belong here." Jackson stepped closer, voice low but firm. "Watch your words, Karen. This is a community, not a battlefield." But Karen was beyond reason. The heat in her eyes burned. Brighter, and without warning, she lunged toward Emily. The sudden movement shocked everyone. Emily reacted quickly, but Karen's outburst threw the moment into chaos. In her fury, Karen tripped over a small garden hose lying across the grass, a careless mistake that sent her crashing to the ground with a painful thud. A collective gasp filled the air. Karen lay sprawled on the grass, clutching her ankle, her face contorted in pain. Emily froze, eyes wide with shock. Jackson rushed forward to help, his face tight with concern. "Are you okay?" he asked, kneeling beside Karen. Karen gritted her teeth, refusing help. "I'm fine," she snapped, though her ankle throbbed fiercely. Neighbors circled, some rushing to call for an ambulance, others whispering urgently among themselves. The confrontation had erupted into something far beyond petty disputes, a physical moment that threatened to shatter the fragile peace of the neighborhood. As paramedics arrived and tended to Karen's injury, the community stood in stunned silence. The summer night air seemed heavier, thick with questions. No one dared voice aloud. Had Karen's fury crossed a line? What would come next? And how much damage had already been done? For Emily, the incident was a harsh reminder of the battles she faced every day, battles that weren't just physical, but deeply personal. For Karen, the fall was more than a twisted ankle. It was the beginning of a disaster she hadn't foreseen, one that would upend her life and the entire neighborhood's fragile balance. The ambulance sirens faded into the distance, but the tension in Willow Creek was far from over. Karen sat on her couch at home, her injured ankle elevated on a pillow, the pain throbbing sharply with every heartbeat. Yet, It was her bruised pride that ached far more. Her fall had become the talk of the neighborhood. Whispers and sidelong glances followed her everywhere she went. Karen was no stranger to conflict. But this time, the line had been crossed. People weren't just talking. They were taking sides. Meanwhile, Emily sat beside her father in their living room. The events of the previous evening lingered in her mind like a dark cloud. She replayed the moment Karen had lunged at her, the shock of the sudden attack, and then the chaos that followed. Despite the fear that had flickered in her eyes, Emily knew she had to be strong, not just for herself, but for her father and the community they wanted to build. But Karen's fury was not yet quenched. Each day that passed only fed the fire inside her, twisting her anger into something darker. Late one evening, under the cover of darkness, Karen slipped out of her house. Her ankle was still tender, but she was determined to confront Emily again. This time, away from the crowd and the watchful eyes of neighbors. She found Emily in the community garden, the soft glow of the streetlights casting long shadows across the flower beds. Emily was alone, tending carefully to a small patch of wildflowers. Her own quiet rebellion against Karen's obsession with perfection. Karen's footsteps were heavy as she approached. Her voice was low, trembling with rage. "You think you can just come in here and ruin everything? Your wheelchair, your attitude, it doesn't belong." Emily looked up, surprise flashing across her face. But she didn't back down. "I'm not ruining anything," she said quietly. "I'm just trying to live." Karen's fury boiled over. "You're a problem," she hissed. "And I'm going to make sure you don't get away with it." Before Emily could react, Karen lunged forward, grabbing at the wheelchair's armrest. The chair tipped dangerously as Emily struggled to maintain balance. Panic surged through her as she fought to stay upright. But Karen's momentum betrayed her. She lost her footing again, crashing onto the ground with a painful thud. This time, it wasn't just her ankle. The impact left her winded, struggling to catch her breath. Emily's shock melted into quick action. Despite her disability, she moved with surprising speed and strength, steadying Karen and helping her sit up. "Stop," Emily said firmly, eyes blazing with a courage Karen hadn't expected. "This isn't you." Karen's chest heaved. The fire in her eyes flickered, replaced by something fragile. Confusion, regret, maybe even shame. Sirens wailed again in the distance, growing louder as neighbors called emergency services after. Hearing the commotion, as paramedics arrived and tended to Karen once more, the neighborhood felt the weight of what had just happened. This wasn't just a feud anymore. It was a disaster, unfolding before their eyes. The incident made headlines in the HOA newsletter, dividing the community even further. Was Karen a victim of frustration, or a bully who had finally gone too far? And what about Emily, the quiet girl whose strength had stunned them all? Jackson stood firmly beside his daughter, his protective instincts stronger than ever. "Emily's safety is my priority," he told the board at an emergency meeting. "We won't let this continue." Karen, meanwhile, faced mounting legal troubles and mounting social isolation. The woman who once ruled the neighborhood with an iron fist was now on the defensive, her anger turning inward as she confronted the consequences of her actions. But beneath the surface, a question lingered. Could Karen find a way back from this disaster? Or was the damage too great to repair? The days that followed Karen's attack were a blur of noise and discomfort. Willow Creek's quiet streets had become a battlefield, not just between neighbors, but within themselves. For the first time, the perfect order Karen had cultivated was shattered beyond repair. Karen lay in her bedroom, the pain in her ankle now mingling with a deeper ache of isolation. Friends who once nodded politely now avoided eye contact. The HOA board had placed her under scrutiny, and rumors about potential legal action swirled through the community like wildfire. Her phone rang constantly. Calls from lawyers, neighbors, demanding apologies, even a few from people she barely recognized. Karen refused most of them, retreating further into her fortress of anger and regret. Meanwhile, Emily found solace in small victories. Each morning, she faced the neighborhood with quiet determination, refusing to let Karen's wrath define her. Her father, Jackson, was her strongest ally, walking beside her with pride and fierce protection. One afternoon, Emily attended a neighborhood meeting, held specifically to address the conflict. The atmosphere was tense, the room packed with worried parents and residents seeking answers. The HOA president, Lisa, opened the floor. "We cannot allow this division to continue. We must find a way to heal our community." Emily stood, her voice calm but resolute. "I don't want to be a source of trouble. I want to be a neighbor, someone people can count on. But that can't happen if fear and hate are allowed to rule." Her words resonated through the room. Some nodded in agreement. Others shifted uncomfortably. Karen was absent from the meeting, still recovering, but aware that her absence was being noticed. Her stubborn pride kept her from participating, but inside, she wrestled with a growing storm of doubt and loneliness. Late one evening, Karen's husband, Mark, found her staring blankly at the TV, lost in thought. "Karen," he said gently, "maybe it's time to face what's really going on. Holding on to this anger won't fix anything." Karen's eyes flashed with frustration. "I'm protecting this neighborhood. I'm protecting us. But at what cost?" Mark asked quietly. "You've hurt people. People who don't deserve it." Karen turned away, tears threatening to spill. For the first time, she wondered if she had become the very thing she despised. The next morning, Karen took a tentative step. She drafted a letter addressed to the HOA and the Jackson family. It wasn't an apology, at least not yet, but an olive branch. A promise to reconsider her actions and seek peace. Meanwhile, Emily read the letter with cautious hope. She knew Karen's pride ran deep, but maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for healing. As the neighborhood watched, the tension began to loosen, but the scars ran deep. Trust would have to be rebuilt, brick by painful brick, and just when it seemed the worst was behind them, a new threat emerged, something no one had expected, that would force Karen and the Jacksons to confront the true meaning of community. Just as Willow Creek began to catch its breath from the turmoil between Karen and the Jackson family, an unsettling new challenge cast a shadow over the neighborhood. It arrived quietly at first. A letter slipped under doors, a flyer pinned to the community board, a whisper in the wind. The message was clear. Change was coming, and it wasn't going to be gentle. The neighborhood was slated for a massive redevelopment plan. A corporate developer had bought the large vacant lot at the edge of Willow Creek, intending to build luxury townhouses and a shopping complex. The plan threatened to upend the neighborhood's character, bringing noise, traffic, and outsiders into their peaceful enclave. The news hit the community like a thunderclap. Even Karen and Jackson, who had spent weeks at odds, found themselves confronted with a common enemy. At the next HOA meeting, the room was packed beyond capacity. Faces that had avoided each other now exchanged urgent glances. The dispute that had consumed them was suddenly dwarfed by this new threat. Karen, still recovering but determined, stood up with unexpected resolve. "This neighborhood is our home. We fought hard to keep it safe, clean, and peaceful. We can't let some corporation come in and tear it all down. Jackson nodded in agreement, his voice steady. We may have our differences, but we all want to protect this place. Now more than ever, we need to stand together. Emily, sitting beside her father, felt a flicker of hope. If her neighbors could unite against this, maybe there was a future beyond the conflict. For days, the neighborhood mobilized. Flyers were printed, petitions circulated, and town hall meetings organized. Karen and Jackson, once bitter adversaries, found themselves side by side at community rallies, their shared determination forging an uneasy truce. But the developer was relentless, offering promises of new amenities and increased property values that divided some neighbors who saw opportunity amid the threat. The tension within Willow Creek shifted from personal battles to a fight for survival. Arguments broke out in the streets, neighbors questioned each other's loyalties, and old wounds threatened to reopen under the strain. One evening, as Karen returned home from a meeting, she found a disturbing note taped to her door. Stay out of this or face the consequences. The handwriting was unfamiliar, jagged and menacing. Her heart pounded. Was this a warning from the developer's agents? Or something darker from within the community? Karen considered calling the police, but hesitated, fearing it would only escalate matters. Across the street, Emily watched her own family's home with a mix of fear and determination. The battle to save their neighborhood had become something far bigger and far more dangerous than she ever imagined. As the developer's bulldozers moved closer and tempers flared hotter, Willow Creek stood on the brink of a reckoning. Would Karen and the Jacksons find the strength to lead their neighbors through the storm? Or would the fractures in their community tear them apart forever? The dawn broke over Willow Creek, casting pale light over the quiet streets that had become the front line of a battle no one could have predicted. Bulldozers were parked ominously near the vacant lot, ready to begin work at any moment. The community's protest had drawn media attention, but the developer remained stubborn, pushing forward with permits in hand. Karen stood on her porch, her injured ankle now healed, but her spirit still raw. She watched the crowd gathering at the community center, neighbors rallying with signs and chants. This was no longer about personal grudges or petty disputes. It was a fight for the soul of their neighborhood. Jackson arrived beside her, his expression grim but hopeful. We've come a long way, he said quietly. Karen nodded. More than I ever thought possible. Emily, pushed in her wheelchair by her father, joined the group. Her smile was tired but determined, a symbol of resilience and hope. The meeting that day was tense. The HOA president called it to order, urging calm and unity. Representatives from the developer were invited to listen, but their dismissive attitudes only fueled the community's resolve. Karen surprised everyone by standing and addressing the crowd. I was wrong, she admitted, voice steady. I let anger blind me to what really matters. Community, compassion, and standing together. I'm sorry, Emily, and I'm sorry to all of you for the division I caused. The room was silent for a heartbeat before applause erupted. Even Emily's eyes glistened with tears. Suddenly the lights flickered, and a loud crash echoed from outside. Everyone rushed to the windows to see that a group of protesters had blocked the construction site entrance. Locking arms and chanting, the developer's security tried to break through, but the neighbors stood firm, united. As tension mounted, a sudden figure emerged from the crowd. An elderly woman, Mrs. Harper, longtime resident and voice of reason. Enough fighting among ourselves, she said, raising her hands. This is our home. We must fight with our hearts, not with hatred. Her words struck a chord. Just then, a call came through on Karen's phone. a last-minute proposal from the developer's office. They were willing to halt construction and negotiate a scaled-down plan that preserved much of the neighborhood's character. The room erupted in cautious celebration, but as the crowd dispersed, Karen and Jackson shared a look, one of mutual respect and understanding. Their feud was over, but the scars remained. They had learned a painful truth. Community isn't about perfection or control. It's about acceptance, strength, and standing together in the face of adversity. Emily smiled brightly as her father pushed her home. "We did it," she said. Karen, watching from her porch, whispered to herself, "Maybe this is the beginning of something better." And for the first time in a long time, hope blossomed in Willow Creek.